On Children's Day, it was a sunny and joyful day filled with festivities. My family and I joined the grand celebration in the city center, where children were dressed in colorful outfits, playing gleefully, and I was immersed in the joyful atmosphere. As the Children's Day celebration continued into the afternoon, we were preparing to conclude the delightful day and head home for a sumptuous dinner when something terrifying happened, an incident that I will never forget. I noticed that my son, Mike, was playing in the amusement area nearby, while my wife and I were buying food at a nearby stall. We believed Mike had grown up a bit and knew how to protect himself, so we weren't overly worried. However, when I turned around to check on Mike, he was nowhere to be found. A chilling fear surged through me as I immediately began searching and calling out his name. However, Mike seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth, with no response to my frantic calls. My heart started to race, my mind went blank, and I didn't know what to do. My wife and I split up the search, hoping to find our lost son more quickly. I navigated through the crowd, calling out his name repeatedly, hoping he would hear me. Time passed by agonizingly, yet there was still no sign of Mike. Finally, finds it all. When I was almost on the verge of despair, I spotted a young lady leading a boy toward the end of the street. The boy's appearance vaguely resembled Mike's, which gave me a glimmer of hope. Rushing forward, I grabbed the boy's hand tightly. "Mike, where are you going with this lady?" I asked anxiously. The boy turned his head, and I saw his familiar face, finally feeling a sense of relief. However, his eyes were filled with fear and confusion. "Dad, this lady said she's your friend and wants to take me to find you." Mike stuttered. I looked at the woman and realized she was a stranger whom I didn't recognize. A shiver ran down my spine, a surge of anger rising from the depths of my being as I desperately demanded to know who she was and why she wanted to take my son away. "Who are you? Why are you taking my son?" I lowered my voice as much as possible, but my anger and fear were palpable. The woman's expression suddenly turned sly as she attempted to break free from my grip, but I held on firmly, refusing to let go. The surrounding crowd began to gather, but I paid no attention, focusing solely on protecting my son. The police arrived swiftly, and I explained the situation to them. The woman was taken away, and my wife and I embraced Mike tightly, tears streaming down our faces uncontrollably. It felt like I had just experienced a nightmare, but now I finally had my son back, which was the most important thing. It was a tranquil afternoon on a Children's Day, with the sky blue and the clouds leisurely drifting. Everything seemed peaceful and beautiful. However, it was precisely on such a seemingly calm day that I first experienced the taste of fear. A few friends and I were exploring the small forest on the edge of the village, our usual secret base where we often played various adventure games. That day, we decided to play a treasure hunt game, with a simple rule: whoever found the treasure hidden deepest in the woods, actually just a colorful stone, would be the winner. As the game progressed, my friends gradually dispersed, each venturing deeper into the forest. I found myself alone, following a path paved with fallen leaves, with birds chirping in the background and occasional distant barking echoing in the air, carrying the fresh scent of soil and leaves. Just as I immersed myself in the excitement of searching for the treasure, a subtle change quietly occurred. The bright sky seemed to darken imperceptibly, and a chill accompanied the gentle breeze. I halted my steps, surveying my surroundings, only to find that the familiar scenery had turned strange, as if I were no longer in the forest I knew. This feeling of unease crept over me, but curiosity compelled me to continue forward. Suddenly, a strange sound shattered the silence, indescribable neither in animal's calm nor the rustling of leaves in the wind, but more like the low moan of a heavy object rubbing against the ground. I froze in place, my heart pounding, instinctively wanting to turn back home. An invisible force seemed to tug me closer to the source of the sound. Carefully, I pushed aside the branches in front of me, peering through the gap, and what I saw sent shivers down my spine. In a relatively open space stood a dilapidated wooden hut, its door ajar, emitting the strange sound. A sense of foreboding surged within me, telling me to leave immediately, but like being drawn by an invisible magnet, I cautiously approached the hut. Near the doorway, peering inside, I witnessed a scene that still haunts me to this day. The dimly lit interior revealed a pile of debris, among which a huge shadow was slowly moving, accompanied by the peculiar sound I had heard earlier. To my terror, it turned out to be a gigantic wild animal, perhaps a less wild boar, rummaging through the items. Though looking back now, it might not have been an extremely dangerous creature, but to my young mind, It was akin to a monster from a horror movie. In that moment, the fear gripped me entirely, rendering me unable to move or even breathe loudly. Fearing to alert the creature, time seemed to stand still, each second stretching endlessly. Eventually, survival instinct snapped me back to reality. I swiftly turned around, almost stumbling out of the forest, running frantically towards home, heedless of anything else. Upon reaching home, I recounted my experience to my parents, and although they reassured me that it might have been just a misunderstanding, they solemnly warned me never to wander so far alone again, let alone enter unknown abandoned houses. For a long time afterward, whenever I recalled that afternoon, a chill would run down my spine, not just because I encountered an unknown creature, but also because of the sudden, profound fear of the unknown. Despite its terror, this experience became an important chapter of my growth. It taught me the importance of courage and caution, helping me realize that while exploring the unknown world is exciting, safety always comes first. It was an ordinary yet special Children's Day in 2005. Our school organized an outdoor movie screening. As night fell, we all gathered in a small forest behind the school, waiting for the movie to begin. The forest was beautifully decorated with various colorful lights, emitting a dazzling glow. Sitting on the ground with snacks in hand, I and the other children eagerly awaited the start of the movie. The movie began, and everyone sat quietly, watching the screen intently. However, halfway through the movie, the screen suddenly went black, and all the lights went out. In an instant, the forest became pitch black, with only the faint glow of our handheld flashlights. "What's going on?" someone asked, their voice filled with panic and unease. Everyone stood up and looked around, trying to figure out what was wrong. But besides the faint glow in the darkness, we couldn't see anything. Suddenly, a scream echoed through the forest, piercing and terrifying. Everyone was startled, and fear gripped our hearts. Who was screaming? What had happened? We were all at a loss. "Quick, turn on your flashlights," someone suggested. So we all turned on our flashlights, trying to locate the source of the scream. However, when our beams of light shone into the depths of the forest, we found nothing but trees and shadows. Looking eerie and frightening in the dim light, the scream echoed again, clearer and more piercing this time. Everyone instinctively looked in the direction of the sound, but still, there was nothing to be seen. Fear gripped us like an invisible hand, tightening around our hearts. "We need to get out of here," someone suggested, and others quickly agreed. So, we followed the beams of our flashlights, hastily making our way out of the forest. But, just as we were about to leave, the lights in the forest went out once again. "What on earth is happening?" someone asked, their voice filled with panic and anxiety. We were all at a loss, relying only on the faint glow of our flashlights to try and figure out what was going on. Then, hello, sinister laughter echoed through the forest, sending chills down our spines. We all instinctively stopped in our tracks, feeling a cold shiver run down our spines. The laughter grew louder and clearer, as if it were right beside us. "Run!" someone shouted, and everyone else followed, trying to get out of this terrifying place as quickly as possible. We ran with all our might, ignoring everything else and heading towards the exit of the forest. Finally, we managed to escape the forest and return to the school playground. By this time, the movie had ended, and the teachers were comforting the other children. When they saw us, they immediately rushed over, asking us what had happened. However, we couldn't explain it to them. We were still puzzled by what had happened in the forest, but one thing was for sure: we would never forget that night. In the darkness, fear and despair intertwined, leaving an indelible mark on our hearts.